and the old man ran it. And that went along sort of okay.
I mean, when you say the old man, you mean
Mr. Woodfill, yes. Stuart Woodfill.
Stuart. But at that point, he wasn't the old man yet. He
No,
was
that's
still
true.
a pretty young
That's
man.
true.
But anyway, those three
ran it,
owned it, and he ran it, and then what happened?
Well, it wasn't a perfect threesome. And he got out, and they bought him out with a bunch of paper before the crash. So he was 30 years old, newly married, and retired.
He had a lot of money from the sale because he got it at the right time.
Well, but he didn't get all his money. I mean, it was a lot of paper
Mainly
involved.
paper, okay.
So anyway, here he was. He thought himself was pretty well set, had a good-looking wife, and he was living in Chicago and enjoying the world. And bang, we get the Depression.
Yeah.
So he fought his way back in.
To the company.
And finally bought it in 31.
Bought it from the other
From the
two.
estate, yes.
And so from that point on, he was totally in charge.
That's right, except the Ballards still operated the gambling.
Oh, really?
And he got a piece.
So anyway, okay, he's in charge at that point. What was business at the hotel like at that time? Was it struggling in the Depression?
Oh, God, well, the 20s were booming,
yeah.
But the Depression was a total struggler. I don't know how anyone ever did it. I mean, they worked on, he bought everything from meat to paint on due bills, and there was a hell of a market in due bills, and you could really buy anything from due bills.
You remember how old you were, maybe the first time you ever went to Mackinac Island?
8 or 9.
8 or 9. And you were the son of Stuart Woodfill's sister.
True.
Right? Raised in Ohio.
Right.
Circleville, near
Circleville,
Dayton.
Ohio.
Okay.
Near Columbus, more.
Near Columbus, okay. And so you went up there. Were you immediately enchanted by Mackinac
Well,
Island?
you know, I
was
enchanted by my uncle and aunt, and they treated us well when we were there. And so it was kind of a romantic place as a young kid to go up there. I'm right off the farm pretty much.
Sure.
And
so you kept going kind of on and off maybe every year?
Well, every other year, every third
year. And then you went to college?
Not yet. I'm still getting through the war, and then my dad died.
Okay.
At the end of the war. And I remember, that's really the first visit I remember. So I was probably 14. My mother and sister and I went up there for probably 10 days or 2 weeks that summer. And that's the first visit I really recall.
You really remember?
It's the first time I ever think I had a necktie on. I remember he loaned me one and it hit me about the knees. And it was pretty good.
Well, so from that point on, did you kind of think almost like your uncle had thought years before, you know, there's something magical about this
I was
place.
certainly intrigued.
Yeah.
And I worked there 3 of my 4 college years. And at the end of that thing, I was pretty well ready to become committed. Went in the Army for a couple of years and came back and got married and went up there.
Was that like in 51?
No.
Later than that?
Much younger than that.
Much?
I graduated college in 55. I went up there in the season of 51 as a first year.
Oh, the first, okay.
As a summer worker.
I got you. Okay, so 55.
55 to 7, I was in the Army. Came back from the Army, got married in the fall, went to work the first of the year in Chicago for Grand Hotel.
And they had an office in Chicago
yes.
in the off season those years.
That's right.
Mr. Woodfill was alive and he was still in control, and he lived until when?
85 or 6.
85 or 86. Okay, so it was really 30 years there when you and your uncle were working together, you know, in the hotel.
He brought me in as a young kid, and I was called me an assistant manager, and basically it was trying to sell conventions in the winter and trying to service them in the summer.
Right. Well, now there's a picture, isn't there, of Stuart Woodfill over the staircase in the lobby? What is that? Your idea to put it there?
Oh, hell no!
Did he command that it be put there?
Well, it was kind of all my life deal. The first summer, maybe the second, we were up there, and now you got to realize I have a new wife, have a kid by that point, another one coming along, and this is my vocation. I'm
Sure.
hooked.
Right.
So the old man decided that he was going to have his portrait painted. I'd never heard of anything like that in my life. I'm still on the farm, see. And so that happened, and that picture was in his house then from 56 or 7 or 8 or 9 along in there, 60 maybe. And yeah, he told me over and over, he said, when I'm gone, you're going to hang that thing in the parlor, and I'm going to look down at you every goddamn day.
I'm going to be watching you, huh? Okay, that's a great idea. And so he, you say hanging in the house, so he actually didn't live in the Grand Hotel himself during most of that time. Did he have a house separately?
He lived in the hotel in the early 30s, and before the war, he bought a cottage up on the bluff, which was now and still then and now is called Pontiac Lodge. It's just been rebuilt into a lovely facility, but it was a very small cottage with a kind of a bedroom, living room in it, but a wonderful porch over the water, and he loved it, and they lived up there.
He lived up there.
Before the war, he bought the house that I now live in, which is down on the boardwalk. And he did that for a lot of reasons, but basically there was no water up on the bluffs in those days, and you had to be downtown to have spring and fall water, or year-round water.
We talked a lot about gambling. What about prohibition and drinking?
Near as I can tell, it was pretty much drinking as normal. That predates me, but the stories we only had one bar, which is still the bar in the hotel off the parlor.
Right.
And that bar served the dancing room, and it served the dining room, and that was it. That was the show. But as far as I can determine, drinking just went on as normal, and prohibition didn't stop us. Booze came along across on boats, and we received it.
They come usually across the straits.
Across the straits, yes.
And was there ever any attempt at enforcement?
If there was, we'd hide it, and they'd turn the bar into a rug shop, hang them in there, and
they'd hang carpets or rugs
yes,
on the walls over where
the bar is.
The bar was.
I don't know what they did with the booze, but
so if anybody that looked like a cop,
the gendarmes came along, man, they were selling rugs. But I think they got about 3 days' notice anyway, so they had enough time to do it.
So somebody would get an alert. From the mainland or something?
From the mainland, they're on their way.
They're on their way. Well, when they came in, were they really loaded for bear? Did they,
Bill, I don't know that.
You're not really sure.
And
they maybe just winked
my uncle
at the
never
rugs.
really talked about that much, other than said we got enough warning that we were.
Yeah. And was there drinking, though, like in the Island House and elsewhere on the island?
I think all over.
Yeah.
Like everywhere.
Yeah. What about segregation on the island? How did it manifest itself?
It manifested itself as you think back and you think it through, that Mackinac was a busy place. They could not find enough local people to run those properties, and they relied on black employees.
Okay, so when you say run the properties, you mean like hotels?
Like hotels?
Restaurants?
Yes.
And that sort of thing.
Yes.
So would these
they were
African Americans come just during the season?
Just during the season, and many of them had seasonal spots in the south and would work their way south. French Lick was the first stop out of here.
Oh, I see. So they kind of work in different places
that's right.
Around the country depending on the
That's
weather
right.
and the season.
That's exactly right.
And so when they came up, though, they were segregated in their living quarters, in other words?
They were, when I arrived at Mackinac in 1951 as a kid, it was astounding. Yes, we had segregated housing.
Where did they live?
They lived we now have a lot more better housing facilities than we did then. We have a community we built out in the middle of the island.